We're so excited to have with us today Janice P. Nimura, author of our current read-along pick, The Doctors Blackwell, How Two Pioneering Sisters Brought Medicine to Women and Women to Medicine. Janice received a coveted Public Scholar Award from the National Endowment for the Humanities to support her work on this joint biography. Janice's previous book was another joint biography, Daughters of the Samurai, A Journey from East to West and Back. Some of the publications in which her essays and book reviews have appeared include the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Smithsonian, The Rumpus, and Lit Hub. Oddly enough, back in 1988, Janice told her college guidance counselor that the one thing she knew she'd never be is a historian. Sometime since then, she fell in love with archival treasure hunting, and we hope to hear more about that during our conversation. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the first thing we thought we would ask is, what drew you to the Blackwell sisters?
Well, I learned with my first book, which was about 19th century Japan, that border crossing 19th century women were fabulous. And I wanted to spend more time with more of them in a different context. And the other thing I learned from my first book was that in order to do this kind of work, you have to be in love with your material. And for me, for the first book about Japan, I am the American daughter-in-law of a Japanese family. I had lived in Tokyo for a few years. There was real resonance with the story I was telling in my own life. And I was also interested in that moment in history in a identifying way, not just a casual way. So when I finished that project, I really wanted to do another one. I sort of looked inside myself and said, okay, what else is in there that I can connect to in that deep identifying way? And what else was in there turned out to be pre-med me from 1989. I had, hit college with the intention of being a doctor, and then got seduced by the humanities. But that fascination with medicine, and especially 19th century medicine, which is just so gothic and juicy and sticky and wonderful, terrifying. On top of all that, I now had a daughter who was showing some interest in the field of medicine. And so it felt like the right direction to head in at the time. And it turned out to be so. They provided me with an excuse to go back and study medicine in a way that I had decided against years back.
I love how you take us back to the beginning when the American Medical Association is being established. And, they really looked at the body as a garden then. There's a whole paragraph you write about that. And then, they started to realize, well, there's more mechanics to the body that we need to study. Can you talk a little bit about going back deeply to that time at the beginning of the American Medical Association?
Yeah, I mean, for that idea, I really owe a debt of gratitude to the author Victoria Sweet, who is another big name in narrative medicine. She's a physician in San Francisco who wrote a wonderful book called God's Hotel, about sort of the last great public hospital in San Francisco, and about slow medicine. And she is this amazing combination of physician and historian of medieval history of medicine. So she has a lot of information in that book that I really responded to about the metaphors of the body. So pre-industrially, when we were agriculture based as various cultures, this metaphor of the body as garden was prevailed. The idea that you had to nurture the body, help it heal, like a plant. And then with the coming of the Industrial Revolution and this shift in metaphorical ideas toward mechanism, that the body is a mechanism, and when it breaks, it needs to be fixed. That was a real shift that came with the shift in the culture in the 19th century. And I found that really a useful structure, framework to lean on in thinking about these shifts that Elizabeth and Emily were navigating as new doctors, as new female doctors. There was so much in flux in the moment that they hit the scene. That's part of what makes the story interesting.
It's true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thinking about the garden and bugs and medicine, particularly leeches. We learned a few new things about how they were used, particularly in women's health, which were really surprising. You know, I'd heard about leeches being used for bleeding, but not particularly in, you know, the OB/GYN world.
Right. Is your listenership ready for this kind of detail?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, leeches were used for bleeding. I mean, lancets were used for bleeding. If you needed to be bled because of a regular inflammation, you might be bled, you know, in your arm or, you know, in the normal places where we still take blood today. But bloodletting also was site specific. So if you had an inflammation in a certain place, that's often where the blood was taken from. And if you had a gynecological complaint, and getting a knife in there can do some damage. Sometimes they sent a leech down there to do some of that work. And I believe they did it by connecting a piece of string to the tail of the leech and letting it get in there and then pulling it out when it was full.
It definitely.
I hope I haven't lost you some membership here. But yeah, it's that kind of detail that I love, because how can you forget that? And how can you not feel more identification with a woman who is faced with the necessity of trying to do this for the first time while betraying no sense that she has no idea what she's doing.
Right.
That humanized Emily Blackwell studying medicine in Edinburgh instantly for me. I hope nobody is watching too closely, because I'm not going to get this right the first time.
Right. How many did I send down there?
Right.
You know, oh, gosh.
Are they full? I don't know. How do you tell when a leech is full? Yeah.
Oh, you can tell.